So I'm going to leave his facial animation as far as the mouth is concerned. Now what you can do as well is animate the eyes and so on. So let's just say I've gone right through and I've animated the entire mouth for that entire sequence. Okay, I've done sort of like the first maybe 40 frames out of 440. Okay, it's the same process. You just go through and you pick the sounds out and make the shapes with the mouth and keyframe them. So let's say now I've got the mouth done and I want to add in like things like the eyes. So I'm going to go right back to the beginning of my animation like this, and I'm going to start off with his eyebrows, let's say. So let's say I want him to kind of start off looking a little bit angry. So I'm going to set his eyebrows down. Okay, like that. Not all the way, but maybe about there. Usually I go sort of midway. Okay, so he doesn't look sort of kind of a little bit surprised. And it gives you enough room to be able to go back and get a little bit of subtle movement back this way without looking really surprised, but also it allows you to push in forward and look really angry. So a good sort of mid-range. Now don't forget I've also got an eyebrow up value just here which I can push the other way. So if I want to go really surprised, I can dial that one up. But generally I'd kind of have that one sort of up a little bit. So I'm going to keep that there for the time being, and I'll just key that. So when he starts to speak, what I want to do is actually get his eyebrows to kind of pop down a little bit. So just before that first sound comes in, I'm going to keyframe it, and then in the middle of that word, okay, maybe just before the middle of that word, I'm going to increase this a little bit, like that, and then I'll keyframe that. And then I'll hold it, I'll go forward a few frames, and then I'll keyframe it again. So what will happen is it'll come down as he starts to speak, it'll hold there, and then as he goes into the next word, so where he's got, there's the M for men, what I'll do is I'll dial it back to sort of that mid-range, and I'll key it there. So what will happen is, as he starts to say the first word, you can see there his eyebrows pop down a little bit, like that. So I can continue on that process all the way through and adjust his eyebrows. Now for his eyes, what I can do is, perhaps what I might do is start off with his eyes. If I use the move tool, I'll just get the move tool to activate, hopefully. Oops, there we go. So I'll grab the move tool from the side, and what I want to do is start him off not looking at who he's talking at. So what I might do is put his eyes down here, like that, and I'll keyframe that object just there. Now the keyframe for this, because it's an object, is a little bit different. I need to keyframe these two values just here. So what I can do is I can highlight both of them and right click and hit key selected, or you can just press the letter S on the keyboard and that will keyframe these two. Alright, so I'm going to start that there, and before he begins to speak and before his eyebrows move, I'm going to probably about 10, so he starts speaking on say 16, so on about 10 I'm going to keyframe them again, so I'll right click and hit key selected, and then on about frame 14 I'm going to make them move up back to position again. So I'm going to reset them to 0 and then keyframe them like that. So he starts off looking down, and then he looks up at who he's going to speak to, and then he starts to speak, and his eyebrows move like that. Now you can also add in blinks. Alright, so we've got 6 men came to kill me one time, and then there's a gap. So what I would do is have him blink in that gap. Now you can also have him blink before he starts to speak. Okay, Usually you'll find people will blink in the gaps. When they start to speak, or after they finish speaking, they'll blink. But sometimes they'll also blink halfway through what they're saying as well. So don't forget to add little blinks in now and then. So with the blink, let's look for... okay, we've got eye wink left and eye wink right. I don't think I added a blink, so I'll have to do them separately using those. So yeah, so what you'll have to do is grab eye wink left and eye wink right. And I'll add it in sort of here, in this gap. So I'm going to go to say 58. I'll keyframe both of those open, like that. And then I'll go forward 2 frames. And I'll close the eyes, like this, and I'll key them both. Then usually what I do is go forward 2 more frames and key both of them closed again, still. And then I go forward 3 frames, 1, 2, 3, and I open them and key them. So I tend to find usually that the eyes will close slightly faster than they open. That's usually the way that I tend to do the blinks. So what you'll get is that.
Six men came to kill me one time.
See there? So that's the basic process. So you go all the way through, and once you've sort of done the mouth, go back to the beginning of the timeline, and then start to animate things like the ears moving and the eyebrows moving, so that they kind of work well with what the character is saying, and then go through and make the character blink. And then the final process is to go through and actually rotate the head. So for example with this, the head rotates. So what you do is just select the rotate tool and the handle on top of the head. So what we might do, because he's looking down, what I might do at the beginning is have him kind of looking down like that. Okay, so this is the head position, and that's rotate X. So for this, what I'm going to do is just rotate all of the, or I'm going to keyframe all the rotates. So I'll just highlight all the rotates, right click and hit key selected, like that. And the same with the way that we did the eyes. What I'm going to do is go to about frame 9 or 10. Okay, I might actually go to 10 because I can see his eyes already moving. His eyes move a little bit on 10 anyway, so I might go maybe to 11. I'll keyframe them there, and then just before he starts speaking, maybe on 14 again, I'll reset that back to 0, and I'll keyframe that. So now what he's going to do, so now his action, you can see we've added another layer of movement. So he comes through, his eyes start to move up, and then his head starts to move up, and then they both basically lock on whoever he's speaking to at the same time, and then he begins to speak. So now what we get is something that looks like this.
6 men came to kill me one time.
Okay. Now it's a little bit quick, and we could have adjusted that by, if we'd have kind of worked out the timing of this beforehand, what we could have done is use the offset value in the audio settings to move the audio down the timeline a bit before we started animating. Okay, it's a bit of a pain doing it afterwards, and it doesn't really matter if that kind of doesn't work. So you can see there that the 15 seconds that we've, the 15 frames we've got, which is about half a second of time to move his head up, doesn't really work very well because it's a very quick movement. Normally we'd want that to be maybe a second or two of moving his head up, but you can kind of see the process there. So if we'd have kind of had this planned out to begin with, we could have said, well, we want maybe a second or so of empty space in between or before the audio begins. So we could have set it up in that manner to begin with, but you can kind of see the basic principle there. Okay, so that's the basic gist of it. So what you'll need to do is go through and animate your sequence, and when the sequence is animated, we'll move on to the rendering. So what we'll do is render this out as a sequence. Now when you render from Maya, it won't export the audio, So what we do is we render the animation sequence out and we recombine the audio with it in After Effects or Final Cut Pro after the render. So I'm going to leave this video here, and in the next video we'll render out a sequence and then we'll match it up with the audio and complete the project. So I'll see you then.